Sewing amigurumi is the worst part, isn't it? The limbs don't stay in place, you cannot find symmetry, you feel like it takes forever, and in the end, your amigurumi looks a bit weird. I know how you feel, because I used to struggle with that in my early stages of my amigurumi journey as well. But after almost 10 years crocheting amigurumi, I gathered 5 simple and very important tips to make this step a bit easier and more joyful for you. And if I were you, I would stay here until the end of this video because, well, my tip number 4 is like the cherry on top of the cake, something that, well, I'm pretty sure that you're going to like it. Just stay here. Hey everyone, if you're new here in the channel, I am Bianca from Crocheniacs, and if you want to learn how to crochet amigurumi from scratch, or if just like me, you love everything amigurumi related, then this is the right channel for you. Tip number 1, pin before you sew. Relying on just your hands to keep everything in place is such a big mistake. The second you start sewing, everything shifts and suddenly your toy is lopsided. And I have 2 examples here for you. The first example is my beautiful stitch amigurumi pattern. This amigurumi, I sewed the body to the head and not the opposite. It was the body to the head, and it took me, I don't know, like 10 minutes tops to sew it, and I didn't have to frog it. I didn't have to do it twice. Simply because I pinned everything. Once I pinned the head to the body correctly, and it's something that I also teach in the video. If this video is not available yet, just subscribe to the channel so you won't lose this material that I carefully prepared. And if it's available, I'll leave the link in the description and also here, just so you know. But as I said, this amigurumi, I sewed it quite fast, and it was really, really easy, simply by following this step of pinning things first. Another very important thing that I have to explain when talking about pins is that these are usually very cheap materials, and it's really important to have different pin sizes. And in this box that I showed you before, and it's here in my lap, I have so many different pin sizes because they are very useful for different amigurumi parts, especially when I am sewing the body to the head, like this my stitch amigurumi that I showed you before. I like to use bigger pins like this one. You can see how small this one is compared to this. And I know that every time I show this big pin that I love so much, people ask me here, where did you buy those big pins? They're awesome. And I bought them in Brazil. You know I am from Brazil. I bought them in a local store in my city, and I have never seen them in any other store. But I also have other pins, big pins that I bought online on Amazon, AliExpress, or whatever. They are not as big as this one, but they are very useful, and I dare to say that they are enough to sew amigurumi parts together. Well, and I told you I had 2 examples to share. This is my second example. It's kind of messy because I'm still working on this project. It's a dragon. You can see, actually it's toothless, and you can see how cute it's getting. It demands sewing, and as you can see, there are lots of pins in it, and I am not going to sew it right now, but pins are also very helpful to position everything before sewing. So before attaching, for example, the ears to the amigurumi, and it's not something that I'm going to do right now because there are other steps that I'm still working on, it's important for me to have a big picture of how the amigurumi will look like in the end. So I pin everything, and it might sound silly, but it's very useful, and I'm seeing that lots of people do that as well. You pin everything and you put the amigurumi a bit further to see if they are still in the place that you want it. Because sometimes they are like very close to your face and you don't see if the symmetry is correctly, which is something very tricky. I've seen people complaining that, oh, it doesn't matter how many pins I use because in the end, I cannot find symmetry. But actually, this step of pinning things, putting further, changing position, it might sound silly, but it's really helpful to find symmetry in your toy. So don't underestimate all these steps that I am teaching you in this video, because they will surely make your sewing process better. Tip number 2, don't fasten off before having both sides attached. And what do I mean by having both sides attached? Well, you might have an amigurumi like, I don't know, an elephant. And an elephant has 2 ears, 2 arms, 2 legs. And one of the biggest mistakes when crocheting amigurumi like this is attaching like one of the arms, sewing it, fasten off, and then you do the second. Don't do that, because maybe you didn't like the position of the first one, and well, it's already fastened off, and it will be kind of messy to frog it and, I don't know, do it all over again. So whenever you have 2 parts of a doll, of an animal, you attach both parts, you pin both parts, you sew the first one, don't fasten off, leave the tail, like the remaining thread there, and then you sew the second. Do the technique that I told you before, put the amigurumi further. Is the symmetry okay? Does it look pretty? Change position of the toy, and once it's well placed, okay, then you can fasten off both parts. You all know that I have a series of videos here in my channel called Amigurumi Academy, in which I teach people how to crochet amigurumi from scratch, hold the crochet hook, crochet all parts, and also sewing. And in those videos, I explain, of course, step by step for everyone who's learning how to do it from scratch. But these are all the tips that I also give in these videos. I mean, and this pig is the perfect example because it has like 2 legs, 2 arms, 2 ears. I would never fasten off the first ear without pinning and placing correctly, sewing the second one. So once I did the first, okay, now I can do the second. Once I do one arm, then I can do the second, because that helps you with symmetry as well. Tip number 3, use bent metal needles for tricky spots. And I am not here trying to sell you anything or tell you that you need more amigurumi accessories, but indeed, this kind of tapestry needle, they can be really helpful. This pack here is from Tulip that I have, and these are the only ones that I have actually. You know that I usually don't have that many accessories. I try to keep things minimalist. But these bent needles, they are really helpful for tricky spots. And what do I mean by tricky spots? Sewing an arm to the amigurumi, for example, the pig that I just showed you, it's kind of simple. But body to the head or head to the body is one of the things that people struggle the most when it comes to sewing. And again, sharing a little bit of my experience here, these kind of bent needles I bought last year, after 9 years crocheting amigurumi and sewing parts with the traditional tapestry needles, I decided to give it a try, and they really helped. So that's why I'm telling you that this is not mandatory, because I spent my whole life sewing things together with the straight, regular, and traditional tapestry needles. But this type of bent needles, they can save you a lot of time when it comes to sewing these tricky spots. Well, I told you I had a special trick for tip number 4, and I was not lying. If you're enjoying this video so far, remember to give me a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the tips, tricks, and tutorials that I bring here every week. You can also join my Patreon community and get early access to new patterns, have the chance to be a pattern tester, and actually join an amazing community full of great and passionate amigurumi crocheters. But now let's get back to our tip number 4, and it is: don't leave a short tail for sewing. Well, have you ever run out of yarn mid-sewing and had to awkwardly tie a knot and continue the sewing process? Yeah, me too. And it's a nightmare. And just out of curiosity, the first time I did that, it was with a polyester fiber, plushy amigurumi, and the nightmare was even worse. But let's get back to the tip. And something that I know is confusing to a lot of people is, I know I need to leave a long tail to sew, but
how long is enough?
I don't want to leave a short tail and create my sewing nightmare, but I also don't want to waste my yarn leaving like meters of thread to sew it in the end. So how can I measure it? How can we measure the amount of yarn to sew amigurumi parts together? Well, I use a trick, and I tried it with different amigurumi, different fibers, different everything, and it always worked. So that's why I'm sharing it with you in this video, and this is the first time I'm sharing this strip. I will show you again with this amigurumi, which is toothless, that I am still crocheting. I have the head and I have the body. I still don't know if it's going to be sewed or not, but I left enough yarn to explain it to you and give you the example. But what I like to do is, for all amigurumi parts, if I was sewing the arms or the ears or the legs, the rule is the same. Before cutting the yarn, I like to wrap the yarn around the part of the amigurumi that is going to be sewed twice, like this. This is like 2.5 rounds, more or less, and then I cut. And when I look at it, I know that this amount of yarn will be enough for me to sew. It is not short, it's not too long, it's enough. That's the trick that I use to sew amigurumi parts together and leave a tail that is long enough to do it. I will do it again, closer, so you can see it. So I wrap the yarn around the parts that I'm going to sew like once. Here's the beginning. I hope you can see it. Here's the beginning. Twice. Okay, 2.5. And I can see that this amount of yarn will be enough for sewing. Maybe someone here will say in the comments that wrapping the yarn twice is too much. Maybe you should do less. But honestly, I prefer to lose just a short amount of yarn than not having enough to finish sewing. And maybe something happens, the yarn can break, the yarn can split, and you have enough room to cut a little piece and continue doing it. So do it twice or 2.5, 3 tops. There is no need to do it more than 3 times, I guess. And you're good to go with the amount of yarn to keep sewing. And let me know here in the comments if this was something new for you and if you like this trick, because I think it's quite awesome. The 5th and last tip that I have for this video is change fiber. Because sewing amigurumi parts with cotton yarn, for example, is quite easy. With all the amigurumi that I showed you here, toothless or stitch, or my cute amigurumi pig, it's quite easy. But have you ever tried sewing parts together with polyester, plushy, chunky yarn? It can be a nightmare, depending on the yarn that you have. And I'm telling you that it really depends on the brand, because I have experience sewing amigurumi parts together with good polyester fiber like this one. The brand that I use to crochet this amigurumi is Alizé Veludo, and I hope this is the correct way to pronounce it, but I love this yarn. This is really good because the yarn does not split easily when we crochet. And again, this video is not sponsored. I'm just sharing my honest opinion about the products. The yarn is really, really good. And honestly, when I started using this yarn, I felt like I don't even want to try other kind of plushy yarn, because this one is really good. And at least here in my city, the price is quite fair. So this yarn here I use to crochet this amigurumi, which is so cute. I love it. This is my funny bunny, the carrot bunny, and I sewed some parts of it. I sewed the arms and the legs of the bunny, and I also sewed the ears slash carrot to the head, just some part of it. You can see, and it was so easy, so smooth, because the quality of the yarn was really, really good. But in case you have a plushy fiber that is not that good, which already happened to me too, changing fibers can be a really good trick. In that case, I would go for cotton yarn, because since they are very strong and they have basically no stretch, sewing parts together with cotton is way easier. So for example, if this yarn was not good, I would take a white cotton yarn, attach it and sew the arms and the legs with, because I'm not mentioning the body to the head because they were crocheted together, but the things that I sewed, which were the arms and the legs, I would definitely have used cotton yarn to sew in it. And also here, the ear/carrot to the head, if the Alizé Veludo yarn was not good enough for this, I would have attached a white yarn or an orange yarn to sew it and finish it off. And believe me guys, sewing amigurumi parts together does not have to be painful. It's way easier than a lot of people picture it out there. It doesn't take forever. I told you, like, head to the body I did in 10 minutes, and these amigurumi, I talked about it in another video here in the channel because it's quite different, and I know some people might be scared, oh my god, it would take forever to sew it, and it didn't. It was really fast. And it's not just because I am more experienced, it's because I follow all the steps that I am giving you in this video are exactly the things that I do myself in every toy, in every amigurumi. I don't underestimate the steps, because if I don't do them, it will also be hard for me. If I don't pin things together, I am not a magician to find symmetry without putting a little bit of effort into it. And it just takes you like a few minutes to pin things before sewing. Don't skip these steps. And believe me, that sewing will be way more enjoyable for you in the future if you start doing it. And that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll leave you with this video here because I am sure you're going to like it too.